Hi, I'm Maria Thea Harris of Velo Sews on social media. Welcome back to Sew 50 podcast on Sew Organised Style. You're listening to the Top 20 Countdown series.
It's funny, I've just had a blood test this morning at the doctor's because I'm convinced I've got gallstones. So yeah, another 50 plus problem probably. And the two ladies, the nurse and the phlebotomist in there, she was saying, oh, I love what you're wearing. Obviously then I'm like, well, I made all this, I'm a dressmaker, so we chat about that. And again, it got onto they're big and busty, we're wearing the wrong size clothes, so they look like caftans. We'd love to learn to sew. So, oh, here you go, here's my information.
That's Lisa. Bobo Bun is her online name. Lisa was on the podcast in September 2020. She's number 16 in the Top 20 Countdown. At the time, Lisa was developing her YouTube channel to bring vintage sewing joy to everyone who shares that passion of all things vintage. Lisa is a lifelong vintage-inspired seamstress and dressmaking teacher. She created Bobo Bun's Sewing School in Norwich, UK. As a child, Lisa was always making something or could be found curled up with a book. Does this sound like you too? Lisa first learnt to sew on her mum's vintage sewing machine. Lisa has been sewing non-stop since then, learning everything she could while teaching as her full-time career. These days, if Lisa is not teaching dressmaking classes, you'll find her sewing, knitting, or planning her next project. This is the third time I'm thanking Lisa for being on the podcast, as last year Lisa kindly gave me her permission to use her podcast as part of a video podcast assignment I had to complete for my diploma in screen and media. If you're interested, the Jukebox series is on the Sew Organised Style YouTube account. Please be kind with your comments. Thank you, Lisa, for the vintage sewing teaching and inspiration you provide us online and in real life. Are you ready to step back into 2020 and hear Lisa's story? Let's have a listen now.
Today's guest is Lisa Smith-Clare, or Bobo Bun. Lisa is passionate about vintage sewing and teaches a range of sewing classes. So let's welcome Lisa. Welcome, Lisa, to the podcast.
Hello, Maria. Lovely to meet you.
Same here. I've seen you on Instagram and love the images and the vintage vibe that you have with your sewing.
Yeah, totally passionate about it. Vintage and colour.
Definitely colour.
Yeah, I don't do pale.
And the colours that you use are so beautiful that it's always a pleasure to go through the posts that you've got up there as well. So very inspiring. It's very inspiring.
Very kind of you to say. Thank you.
That's okay. Would you like to give our listeners an idea of where you live?
Yeah, I live in Norwich, which is in England, a county called Norfolk. We're kind of around bump out on the east coast of the UK. So we're kind of isolated. There's no motorways in. So we're kind of a little world of our own, really. But it's beautiful here.
So it's not busy?
No, I live in the main city of the county, which is a lovely medieval city. So there's lots of history by the river. Because we're a circular county, beaches all the way round, lovely countryside. You don't pass through us. You've got to make a trip to come out to us because we're not on the way to anywhere. Okay. So that's why we're quieter in that way, which is quite nice.
Yeah, it sounds lovely. Can you tell our listeners what role sewing plays in your life?
I would probably say, I'd like to say 100% of a role in my life. But yeah, I do have to cook for everybody and do the mum stuff and pay attention to my partner, even though he thinks I'd rather be sewing all the time. Pretty obsessive. We will be out, for a meal or walking down the road and they know I'm looking at someone deconstructing their garment or picking up ideas of how I could put something together.
Yeah.
Always looking at fabric. Yeah, so I'm always looking at inspiration, watching TV programs and wow, look at that outfit. So if I'm not sewing, I'm thinking about sewing. Yeah, it does fill up a whole huge part of my life. Sometimes I'm not necessarily enjoying it. I'm doing it more because I think, I want to get this item made. I don't feel the love for it all the time. Mm-hmm. And I have noticed my life, when my dad died or my marriage ended, I couldn't sew probably for about a year. So I know major emotional situations really hit my creative side.
Yeah.
So where I know some people would find their mental health, they're able to do it and it'll nurture them during that time. But for me, it just took that away. But for the most part, I'm happy to positive and sewing and yeah.
Have you ever been watching TV and seen something on there, an outfit that someone's worn, and then taken a photo of it? Because I've done that before.
Yeah. Or you keep constantly rewinding, trying to get that still for that point. I remember watching Indian Summers with Julie Walters in it, set, 30s, Raj. Oh, I've got so many screenshots of different things that one day I will make. They're all saved away, and yeah, one day those things will get made.
Yeah.
I love doing that because I'll have an idea in my head of an outfit I want, whether, wherever I've seen the inspiration for that thing from, and then I will find different pattern pieces that I can construct that. That's my big thing, really. I very much don't go to one pattern and think, right, I'll make this dress. I pull all the composite parts together so that I can get the garment that I want, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
That's the real fun for me. Yeah, making it individual and my own.
What formed your love for vintage sewing?
It's been a lifelong thing. I can't remember a time where I didn't love. I think it's the nostalgia for the past. I had some lovely elderly aunts. They were beautiful ladies. They grew up in the East End. They were a big Jewish family. And my Aunt Hester, I think she was my original inspiration. Her husband worked in the early movies, after the First World War. And they were such a glamorous couple. They were living in London. She had all her suits handmade. They never had children, so she always had a good career. She didn't have to stop work. And she was just always beautifully attired. And they were like this glamorous couple. And then they moved to Norfolk to retire. And suddenly, I was inheriting a lot of her 50s gowns and things. I'd see all the photos in the 30s and the 40s, but she would be giving me some of her things like 50s jackets. And obviously their house, had all the lovely floral curtains or the cushion covers. And I just remember feeling really happy in that environment, even as a child. 16, I went to art college and liked to dress individually. So I'd say Victorian petticoats with 1950s jackets. And so I can't remember a time where I wasn't always mixing that up, but I wasn't making it for myself at that time. And then that's been a slow evolution. I've always liked an individual style, but I would say probably in the last 10 to 15 years is when I've really said, right, I'm going to make the vintage clothes I want because I'm 6 foot. I'm slim but with big boobs, so ever getting a vintage outfit that I could fit properly or afford. But hey, there are all these amazing patterns out there, so finally I can make what I want to wear.
And you've got a really good range of prints that are vintage inspired, so why not?
Exactly. And I mean, my real love is using vintage fabric, but I'm not, one of these people who has to stick to that because you can't always get the vintage fabric. I love modern designs as well, but making a vintage design in the vintage fabric is obviously even more fantastic.
It is too. What's your experience been in the Sew Over 50 community?
Oh, the Sew Over 50 community. I remember when it first came up, but I wasn't 50, and it felt like a gang that you couldn't join. And then I remember my 50th birthday, which is just after Christmas.
Yeah.
And my partner, Jason, bought me this very expensive Juki sewing machine. I was just a bit like, whoa, I've really arrived now. And obviously I was blasting that over Instagram and I was getting these messages about, you can join the gang now. You're in the Sew Over 50 club. But just from other people that were sewing, they were like joking me. And so obviously I started taking part, and I could have taken part beforehand, but, it was that joke of like, you've hit the golden number now, you can be in. And so, yeah, it was lovely, always looking at their posts, commenting on things. And then when they did the meetup in February this year, I was really excited to be able to go, and meet some of the other people there. That was really lovely. I'd already met Susan Young at SoCam, which I think was the October before that. So that was lovely, thinking, well, I'll see her again and I feel like I know her a bit,
Yeah.
And there's a lovely lady in America, so she'll like this shout out, Laurie, who's LBJ, yeah?
Yeah.
She's got a similar style to me, and so we've hooked up. There's different people that I've got to know. I do feel very sad of late that I don't hook up with it as much as I used to. It's just, I find the whole thing with Instagram, I've got just enough time to post my stuff, but trying to find time to really comment, I don't know how people manage it. And I hate that because it's not down to I'm not interested or don't care. It's just when I do it, you suddenly find 4 hours have gone of your day.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's trying to find that balance. But no, it's a fabulous community.
And you said that you've written a couple of guest posts for Sew Over 50?
Yes, I did when they did a call out, and I thought, well, I'd love to do that. And also, I mean, I speak to Sandy, you know, off and on regularly. So I know, you know, how hard they all work. And so I thought, well, it'd be really nice to help them out too. And I know they do a bit on the vintage. They've had their competitions and things. So I thought, well, there's quite a few people. There's Tina, you know, Vintage Tina, and Sally makes stuff. There's quite a few people who love that. And I think that even people who don't sew vintage, they still find it interesting. They might not want to wear it, but they still find it interesting. And there's lots of techniques involved that you wouldn't use in a modern pattern to give them other skills. So my suggestion to them was these vintage themed posts. I think one was about why sewing with these patterns. And then my second post was picking movie star looks, you know, from the 20s through to the 70s, and suggesting patterns that we can now buy, you know, that would create that type of look. And I tried to pick patterns that weren't just vintage look, you know, they'd work very much in a contemporary wardrobe for women, whatever your age, you know, if you're in 70 or 80. I tried to make it, you know, as wide as possible. So just to inspire as many people. Yeah, it got, you know, some really good feedback. I think people enjoyed them.
I think the fact that you'd picked patterns that could reflect a particular era, it was quite clever, because it at least gives people a way of going about making that outfit if that's what they had in mind.
Exactly. You can either be true to the era or it's showing that all clothes, that all comes around. I mean, I started off with a Louise Brooks kimono. I mean, you could wear that over skinny jeans, you know, with trainers.
Yeah.
Or you can make 20s look. It's up to you how you want to style it, isn't it? So
that's right. And when you did the guest post, did you also have to follow the comments that were happening on that particular post?
Yes, I did, yeah. So, and I replied at length. So there was some nice chats going backwards and forwards, you know, and I picked my days when I knew it was a day where I would literally be at home and I'd not have other things, so I could focus on it and, yeah, keep up to speed with them all. My hardest thing, because I do like to talk, I'm a funny mix of, I'm quite an antisocial person. I love my own company, but when I'm in company, I seem to talk too much. So trying to keep that post nice and short, that was the hardest thing with the words, you know.
And the comments that you got for that post, they actually go past 24 hours, don't they? Because it's global.
Yeah, so I did keep checking back, trying to keep on top of them all. So hopefully, I caught up with everybody.
Oh, I'm sure you would have.
I think a few people got pointed towards patterns, you know, and they got back to me and said, oh, I bought that pattern now. And so that was lovely to know that inspired them, you know, not necessarily getting them to spend the money. And I know Wearing History, Lauren in America, whose pattern company is Wearing History, I met quite a few of the things and loved them. And you know, she said, oh, thank you so much for the shout out. You know, she was really pleased. So that helped her small indie business as well. So that's another lovely thing, you know. I always liked to do that. I remember as a child, when I was about 6, somebody took the credit for my painting and the teacher was wow and told me off for not doing anything. And I knew then if I said anything, they wouldn't believe me. Yeah. And so I've never ever liked other people taking the credit for things. So that's my one rule on Instagram. I always make sure I link everything, I shout people out, because it means a lot to me, you know, to give people the credit where it's due. So.
That's a tough lesson that you learnt at 6.
Yeah, it seems such a silly thing, but it's really stayed with me. So, yeah, I think people should always be credited for what they've done, and it's lovely to share how well you think other people are doing.
That's right, exactly. So with your sewing experience, what is one of the things that you're really passionate about for sewers?
For me, the fittings come as me not fitting things well, so I wanted to learn it, and now I've learned it. I love passing those skills to others.
Because you run sewing classes and it says from beginners to fitting. So fitting is one of those things that a lot of people struggle with. So do you have any advice for people when it comes to getting their garments to fit better?
Fitting garments well, you know, something that I'm really quite nerdy about. That comes from a long time back sewing and, you know, that gamble of not knowing if it will fit when you finish.
Yeah.
And more often than not, it never fitted. So I decided, right, I've got to learn this properly. So I did all the research. I put in all the years of trial and error. I have friends who work in the profession, you know, as tailors, dressmakers, costumiers. So I went to them. They've taught me skills. And it got to the point where I knew I really knew this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also a qualified teacher. I used to teach A-levels, which is the final year of high school. And once you can teach anything, and obviously sewing is my passion. So I moved over from high school teaching to teaching dressmaking, which is wonderful, finally doing the thing I'm passionate about. So to be able to teach people these fitting skills, and I think people, they say they come to me because I'm self-taught. They like that. They know that I've done the graft and I'm going to be speaking their language when I explain it to them. And obviously since lockdown, I've been teaching fitting classes on Zoom, and it's amazing that it works just as well, through a video chat. And then you get this feedback from people saying, wow, this fits me now. So my big area of fitting is for helping ladies with busts, because if we took our boobs off, God, it'd be so much easier to fit the bodice or a shirt, wouldn't it? If we just unscrew those. But they just give this bump or, this extra contour. So I love teaching people. The big eye-opener is about the high bust measurement. Mm-hmm. And this is one tip I pass over to the podcast, that people see the bust measurement on a pattern and they think that is their full bust. But it isn't. We've got to ignore that. We have to think of a bodice in 3 sections. So we always have to think of that bust measurement on the pattern as our high bust measurement, which is the measurement around under our armpits above our bust.
Yep.
And that way, the top will fit on your shoulders and your neckline and above your bust. If you're going by your bust size, it's going to be too baggy up top if you're big busted. And if you're smaller busted, it could be too tight.
Yeah.
So you need to sort of make for that high bust, and then learn how to do any alterations for the bust area, whether it's a small bust, taking it in, or full bust, taking it out. And then next bit, grading for the waist, because that could be another size. So I love giving people the confidence to see how you take a pattern apart and you actually understand what the measurements mean and how to use them. That's my passion of it, really. And so, when I'm in my classes and the ladies measure themselves, they come back the next week and say, I hate my body, I'm going on a diet, because I don't know why it does. And I said, yeah, but we're starting this fabulous journey now. And then we start making these bodices and they suddenly see what an amazing body they've got. It doesn't matter if you're, say, a size 24 to a size 6. Once they're making something that fits and shows their unique body off, they suddenly then think, oh, God, not that diet and all of that nonsense. What was I on about? Because, I've got something that fits and shows my lovely body off.
Yeah.
And you can make it fit you, whether it's tightly fitted or whether you like a looser fit, you're then in charge rather than the ready-to-wear clothes, aren't you?
Yeah, they're sewing for their current body, and that's really what it's all about when it comes to fit.
It's funny, I've just had a blood test this morning at the doctor's because I'm convinced I've got gallstones. So, another 50-plus problem probably. And the 2 ladies, the nurse and the phlebotomist in there, she was saying, oh, I love what you're wearing. Obviously, then I'm like, well, I made all this. I'm a dressmaker, so we chat about that. And again, it got on to they're big and busty. We're wearing the wrong size clothes, so they look like caftans. We'd love to learn to sew. So, oh, here you go. Here's my information. And we were chatting all about sewing. So whatever situation I'm in, it seems to come up that we chat about it and have a lovely time.
That's good. The fact that we've all been in lockdown, what's been one of the positives for you?
Does this sound really bad to say? One, that people couldn't turn up unannounced, because that used to really do my head in. If I was doing something else, I was in a creative moment and just you get a knock on the door. So, nobody could just knock on the door.
Okay.
I quite like the piece of it all. I had a bit of a meltdown at first about how scary it all seemed and how it was affecting my daughters because they're at the university and finishing high school stage. So I didn't like the impact on them at all. But I liked the piece of it. Once I knew we could still make an income, so I wasn't frightened about how we were going to survive. I then was put into a space where, because I couldn't physically work, in my classes, I'd already booked weekends away where I was going to teach workshops. Obviously, all that had to be stopped. So all these exciting new plans were stopped. And I'm always somebody that thinks you can either lay on the floor and cry, and I think that's a total waste of time. I'm just pick yourself up and get on with it, because you need to move forward. So it was, how do we rethink this? And then obviously there were all the adverts about Zoom, it's free, blah, blah, blah. So I muddled through working out how can I actually teach my classes through Zoom. And I worked out and I drawn paper bodices. I email them to the people so that they know what they've got to work on in that class, and it works really well. And I'm just holding the things up to them, to show them.
Yeah.
And we talk it through and I send them all the images. And then I just need to buy a bit more tech for doing the beginners so I can film overhead while I'm teaching. And then I've had friends come up with some great ideas for me to do group classes, so I could teach the same skills rather than one-to-one that I'm doing at the moment. I could teach the same thing to 10 people at a time. So I'm sorting that out at the moment. So I like that it's pushed me into having to think about my small business in another way, because this year, January, was me launching a different branch of how I taught. Rather than freelancing for others, I was setting up on my own. So yeah, it's forced me to think of another angle. And even without lockdown, the Zoom classes would be great because I've taught people in Italy, California, Switzerland. I'm teaching people all around the world that I would never normally meet. So that's something I would like to continue.
It's great that A, you've got the skills to teach, and B, you've come up with another way of getting to the people who actually want your skills. So that's a community service.
And I'm earning money, and I charge them just my standard teaching rate. I'm not trying to make a ridiculous amount out of it. I'm just trying to make it work for everybody. Yeah, and then we have lots of chats offside about it as well, because we're all sewing nutters, aren't we?
We live and breathe it. And as we've already said, take photos of people on TV who are wearing something that we really want to make one day.
Well, I mean, when I took Rosie, my eldest, to Oxford at the weekend, I really liked this woman's top, how the stripes came in at all different angles. Mm-hmm. And I didn't say to my family, but I was waiting for her to get in front of us so I could take a photo from behind because I like the stripe. And I thought, if that woman sees, sure. And then my daughter picked out this one with a turban and these 50s jeans, and she went, "Oh, Mum, that woman looks so cool." And every time I take a photo, my partner stood in the way, and in the end I had to shout, "Get out of the way, I want to take the photo of that one." They decided I'd be a rubbish spy. So yeah, I'm often sort of pouncing on people for the photos. It's not just on the TV.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
There will be other people in the listening audience who also identifies with you.
Yeah, we just need to up our sewing spy skills, don't we, on how to stalk people for good photos.
I think that'd be a great hashtag, sewing spies.
Yeah, sewing spy.
Now I've gone off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're all right. So I would say I'm always thinking of new ideas, ways I can take things. So I hooked up with, because I guess this does link into the Sew Over 50.
Yeah.
I hooked up with Rebecca, who's 29. I love her. She's pretty handsome every day. And she sews very similarly to me. We don't know each other, but, through Instagram. So we set up the Pair of Vintage Sew and Sews hashtag, which we're now going to make as an Instagram page, and there'll be constant things. And, we are going to approach fabric companies to see if they would sponsor us for fabric. We were going to do that at the start, but then lockdown happened and we didn't want to affect their businesses initially.
Yeah.
But now everything is starting to tick over and everyone's managing. That will be our next step. So we make a pattern every month of making something that's vintage inspired or a vintage pattern to show people how it will work. I mean, she's like really petite. Mm-hmm. 29, blonde, so she's got a very different look to me. I'm 6 foot, dark. She's smaller busted, I'm big busted, and I'm, what am I now? 51. So we're trying to show how that same pattern works and can be interpreted differently for two different people, women of different ages. That's been another offshoot, idea from my sewing, something that's fun to do and liking to share with people, hopefully inspire them.
So what's the hashtag?
It's called Pair of Vintage Sew and Sews. Sew, S-E-W, Sew and Sews.
Great.
I think, Sew Over 50 put us when they did their Sew 50 sew along, about friends sewing. Yep. They used our image for that. They asked us if they could do that. So, I'm just always trying to think of different ways that, you can inspire others and inspire myself with different creative ideas.
And just keep thinking of different ideas and how to inspire people, because you've got the teaching skills, you've got the passion for sewing, so you can only just engage people more every day now.
Yeah, that's what I love talking about. And I've got my dear friend Kat, who used to be a costumier in the West End, and she's a vintage dressmaker. And sometimes I'll come back after having been with her for 6 hours And Jason, my partner, will say, "How ever have you talked that long?" And it's like, once we get together and our fabric and pattern and ideas, and it's very easy, isn't it? When you're with another enthusiast, it's very easy to pass the time.
That's right. Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your sewing journey and your passion for vintage sewing and teaching on Sober 50 Thursday on Sew Organised Style podcast.
That's a pleasure. There's so much to try and say and get out, but it's been lovely talking to you, Maria. Thank you.
Lovely to meet you, Lisa, and have a lovely day, listeners.
This episode of Sober 50 podcast on Sew Organised Style was produced by me, Maria Theoharis, with permission of Lisa, sound by bensound.com. Many thanks for the ongoing support of the podcast Patreon contributors. On patreon.com/Sew Organised Style, you can support this podcast every month for the cost of a coffee. Their ongoing support enables me to develop this podcast for free. You can subscribe to Sew Organised Style podcast, but with an S, not a Z, on all good podcast apps. Make sure you go back and listen to our free Sober 50 podcast archive on Sew Organised Style podcast. If you would like to contribute to the many ongoing posts and challenges the team promotes on the Sober 50 account on Instagram, direct message Sandy and the editorial team. The Sober 50 community has over 50,000 followers. We look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.